So let me ask you, the rules you have are not based in U.S. law, right? U.S. law doesn't recognize restrictions on hate speech. It's considered free speech. So if you want to stand on a street corner and yell the craziest things in the world, you're allowed to. On your platform, Twitter, you're not allowed to. So even in that sense alone, your rules do have an ideology behind them. I don't completely disagree. I think, I don't want harassment. But the reason I bring this up is getting into the discussion about democratic health of a nation. So I think it can't be disputed at this point that Twitter is extremely powerful in influencing elections. I'm pretty sure you guys published recently a bunch of tweets from foreign actors that were trying to meddle in elections. Mm-hmm. So even you as a company recognize that foreign entities are trying to manipulate people using this platform. Mm-hmm. So there's a few things I want to ask beyond this, but wouldn't it be important then to just, at a certain point, Twitter becomes so powerful in influencing elections and giving access to even the president's tweets that you should allow people to use the platform based under the norms of U.S. law? First Amendment, free speech, right to expression on the platform. This is becoming too much it's becoming too powerful in how our elections are taking place. So even if you are saying, well, hate speech is our rule and a lot of people agree with it, if at any point one person disagrees, there's still an American who has a right to this, to access to the public discourse, and you've essentially monopolized that, and not completely, but for the most part. So isn't there some responsibility on you to guarantee, at a certain extent, less regulation happen? Right? Like, look, if you recognize foreign governments are manipulating our elections, then shouldn't you guarantee the right to an American to access this platform to be involved in the electoral process?
I'm not sure I see the tie between those things, but I will address one of your points, which was we're a platform that serves the world. So we're a global. 75% of the users of Twitter are outside of the United States.
Oh, right.
So we don't apply laws of just one country when we're thinking about it. We think about how do you have a global standard that can meet the threshold of as many countries as possible, because we want all the people in the world to be able to participate in this conversation.
And also meet elections like the Indian election coming up as well.
Right. And my understanding is you were also accused of being biased against conservatives in India recently. There was a report on that, as well as you held up a sign that said something offensive about the Brahmin. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in that sense, even in other countries, you're accused of the same things that you're being accused of by American conservatives.
I think that the situations are very, very different. And I don't think that the ideologies in play are the same at all.
Well, so the reason
Can we clarify that? Because I'm not aware of the case.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, but we did have our Vice President of Public Policy testify in front of Indian Parliament a couple of weeks ago, and they were really focused on election integrity and safety and abuse and harassment of women and political figures and the likes.
So my concern, I guess, is I recognize you're a company that serves the world, but as an American, I have a concern that the democracy I live in, the Democratic Republic, and the democratic functions are healthy. One of the biggest threats is, Russia, Iran, China. They're trying to meddle in our elections using your platform, and it's effective. So much so that you've actually come out and removed many people. Covington was apparently started by an account based in Brazil. The Covington scandal, where this fake news goes viral, was reported by CNN that it was a dummy account. They were trying to prop it up, and they were pushing out this out of context information. So they do this. They use your platform to do it. You've now got a platform that is so powerful in our American discourse that foreign governments are using it as weapons against us. And you've taken a stance against the laws of the United States. I don't mean like against, like you're breaking the law. I mean, you have rules that go beyond the scope of the U.S., which will restrict American citizens from being able to participate. Meanwhile, foreign actors are free to do so long as they play by your rules. So our elections are being threatened by the fact that if there's an American citizen who says, I do not believe in your misgendering policy, and you ban them, that person has been removed from public discourse on Twitter.
Right, but they don't get banned for saying they don't agree with it. They get banned for specifically violating it by targeting an individual.
Let's say in protest, an individual repeatedly says, no, I refuse to use your pronouns, in like Megan Murphy's case. And she's a Canadian, so I don't want to use her specifically. The point I'm trying to make is, at a certain level, there are going to be American citizens who have been removed from this public discourse, which has become so absurdly powerful, foreign governments weaponize it, because you have different rules than the American country has.
So just to be clear, my understanding, and I'm not expert on all the platforms, is that foreign governments use multiple different ways to interfere in elections. It is not limited to our platform, nor is it limited to social media.
But the president is on Twitter.
The president is on a lot of different platforms, as is the White House.
I think it's fair to point out the media coverage of his Twitter account is insane, and they run news stories every time he tweets.
That's certainly undeniable. I'm just pointing out that there are a number of different avenues for this, and individuals have choices in how they use the platform.
He might have other platforms, but he uses Twitter almost exclusively.
And what I'm trying to bring up is that if Twitter refuses to acknowledge this problem, you are facing regulation. I don't know if you care about that, but at a certain point...
Sorry, which problem?
If you're going to restrict American citizens from participating on a platform where even the president speaks, and it's essentially you have a privately owned public space, if I could use an analogy that would be most apt, and you've set rules that are not recognized by the U.S. In fact, when it came to a Supreme Court hearing, they said hate speech is not a violation. It's actually protected free speech. So there's actual odds. So there might be someone who says, I refuse to live by any other means than what the Supreme Court has set down. That means I have a right to hate speech. You will ban them. That means your platform is so powerful, it's being used to manipulate elections, and you have rules that are not recognized by the government to remove American citizens from that discourse. So as a private platform, you've become too powerful to not be regulated if you refuse to allow people free speech.
But I'm trying to pick apart the connection. I think, so yes, we do have an issue with foreign entities and misinformation. And this is a extremely complicated issue which we're just beginning to understand and grasp and take action on. I don't think that issue is solved purely by not being more aggressive on something else that is taking people off the platform entirely as well, which is abuse and harassment. It's a cost-benefit analysis ultimately, and our rules are designed, again, and they don't always manifest this way in the outcomes, but in terms of what we're trying to drive is opportunity for every single person to be able to speak freely on the platform. And
that's absolutely not true. You don't allow hate speech, so free speech is not on your platform.
I said
speak freely.
Enable everyone, create the opportunity for everyone to speak on our service.
Unless it's hate speech, right?
And in part of that, the recognition that we're taking action on is that when some people encounter particular conduct, that we see them wanting to remove themselves from the platform completely, which goes against that principle of enabling everyone to speak or giving people the opportunity to speak. Our rules are focused on the opportunities presented, and we have particular outcomes to make sure that those opportunities are as large as possible.
Let's separate the point I made about foreign governments was just to explain the power that your platform holds and how it can be weaponized. We'll separate that now. When Antifa shows up to Berkeley and bashes a guy over the head with a bike lock, that is suppressing his speech, right? That's an act of physical violence. However, when Antifa links hands and blocks a door so that no one can go to an event, that is also legally allowed, right? So what you're saying is that if someone is engaging in behavior, such as going on Twitter and shouting someone down relentlessly, that's something external to what happens in the world under the U.S. government. I am allowed to scream very close to you and not let you speak in public. But on Twitter, you don't allow that. So there's a dramatic difference between what Twitter thinks is okay and what the U.S. government thinks is okay, how our democracy functions and how Twitter functions. The issue I'm pointing out is that we know Twitter is becoming extremely important in how our public discourse is occurring, how our culture is developing, and who even gets elected. So if you have rules that are based on a global policy, that means American citizens who are abiding by all of the laws of our country are being restricted from engaging in public discourse because you've monopolized it.
Can I counter that, though? Because these foreign governments are restricted by the same rules. So if they violate those same rules, they will be removed. So if they play within those rules, they can participate in the discourse, even if they are just trying to manipulate our elections. On the other hand, if the people that are on the platform play by those rules, they can also counteract.
Unless their ideology goes in line with U.S. law and is legally allowed, as opposed to what you allow. So foreign governments can absolutely keep making new accounts and keep botting and keep manipulating. They can even post things that'll go viral and then get banned and not care.
Right.
But a private American citizen can say, here's my opinion, I refuse to back down.
I see what you're saying.
You will ban him. So we can see that at a certain point, you have a lot. Twitter is slowly gaining, in my opinion, too much control from your personal ideology based on what you've researched, what you think is right, over American discourse. If Twitter, and this is my opinion, I'm not a lawmaker, but I would have to assume if Twitter refuses to say in the United States you are allowed to say what is legally acceptable, period, then lawmakers' only choice will be to enforce regulation on your company.
Actually, Tim, I spend quite a bit of time talking to lawmakers as part of my role, head of public policy. I spend a lot of time in D.C. I want to say that Jack and I have both spent a lot of time in D.C. And I think from the perspective of lawmakers, they, across the spectrum, are also in favor of policing abuse and harassment online and bullying online.
Well,
those are things that people care about because they affect their children and if they affect their communities and they affect individuals. And so I don't think that, and as a private American business, we can have different standards than what an American government-owned corporation or American government would have to institute. Those are two different things. And I understand your point about the influence, and I'm not denying that. Certainly, Twitter is an influential platform. But like anything, whether it's the American law or the rules of Twitter or the rules of Facebook or rules of any platform, there are rules, and those rules have to be followed. So it is your choice whether to follow those rules and to continue to participate in a civic dialogue, or it is your choice to not do that.
Absolutely. You've monopolized public discourse to an extreme degree, and you say my way or the highway.
Tim, we haven't monopolized it. There are many different avenues for people to continue to have a voice. There are many different platforms that offer that. We are a largely influential one. I'm not trying to take away from that, and we're a very important one.
You don't need to be the most important. It's just that you are extremely important. And that's a compliment. Twitter has become extremely powerful. But at a certain point, you should not have the right to control what people are allowed to say. No private look, I'm a social liberal. I think we should regulate you guys because you are unelected officials running your system the way you see fit against the wishes of a democratic republic, and there are people who disagree with you who are being excised from public discourse because of your ideology. That terrifies me. And we can take it one step further.
So Tim, just so I understand, so are you suggesting that we don't have any policies around abuse and harassment on the platform? I'm trying to understand what it is you're saying because I'm not sure I'm following you. So you don't think we should have any rules about abuse and harassment? So even the threats that you received that you
under
mentioned
US
that we
law.
did, but you mentioned a number of threats that you received, and you were quite frustrated that we hadn't taken action on them. You think we shouldn't have rules that?
I'm frustrated because of the hypocrisy of when I see the flow of one direction, and then what I see are Republican politicians who, in my opinion, are just too ignorant to understand what the hell's going on around them, and I see people burning signs that say free speech. I see you openly saying we recognize the power of our platform and we're not going to abide by American norms. I see the manipulation of Twitter in violation of our elections. I see Democratic operatives in Alabama waging a false flag campaign using fake Russian accounts, and the guy who runs that company has not been banned from your platform, even after it's been written by the New York Times he was doing this. So we know that not only are people manipulating your platform, you have rules that remove honest American citizens with bad opinions who have a right to engage in public discourse, and it's like you recognize it, but you like having the power. I'm not quite sure at what point.
So just to get back to my point, so you believe that Twitter should not have any rules about abuse and harassment or any sort of hate speech on the platform. That's your position.
Well, that's extremely reductive. I don't know. That may be too simplistic. The point I'm trying to make is,
but that is the point you're trying to make. You're asking us to comply with the U.S. law that would criminalize potential speech and put people in jail for it, and you're asking us to enforce those standards.
Well, I mean, if you incite death, it's a crime. You can go to jail for that. So at the very least, when you have people on your platform who've committed a crime and you don't ban them, I say, well, that's really weird. And then when you have people on your platform who say a bad naughty word,